Hi folks, and welcome to the Is It Worth It for the StuG IV, the Tier 5 German Premium Tank Destroyer. This is a reward tank as opposed to a premium tank, but a few people have been asking me recently whether or not I'd be reviewing the reward tanks or tanks that wouldn't normally be considered premium tanks, tanks like the Clan Wars reward tanks, which I've been covering on the channel recently, or tanks like the tank you get for inviting a friend to the game, or the personal mission rewards. This is the first personal mission reward this StuG IV, so consequently, it's not available from the gift shop, and it's not available from the tech tree, but it is available to everyone as long as you can get through the personal missions. So let's get started and begin with the history. The name StuG comes from the German Sturmgeschütz, which basically means assault gun, but for the purposes of this review I'm just going to be calling it the StuG, which is how most people understand and name this tank. Since then, my German is just not good enough to keep on saying Sturmgeschütz. I can't even speak English correctly most of the time, so, yeah, we're familiar with the StuG. We've got the StuG III, we've got, in fact, two versions of the StuG III in-game. Now, the StuG III was a very, very successful assault gun. Originally, it was designed in the early 1940s as a infantry support vehicle designed to take out fortifications, but it was later developed into a tank destroyer role. It became quite a successful tank destroyer, or tank hunter as the Germans would call it. So the StuG III was already in existence. In fact, by the time the StuG IV was built, there were already about 6,000 StuG IIIs in existence. But in February 1943, Krupp, who didn't design the Panzer III that the StuG III was designed on. They designed the Panzer IV. The StuG III was built by a company called, is it Atlet or Alket? They designed the Panzer III and they designed the StuG III as a result, based on the Panzer III chassis. Krupp designed the Panzer IV, and they decided they wanted to design their own StuG, or assault gun, or tank hunter, and they called it basically the StuG IV. They took a Panzer IV and they designed not this hull, or not this chassis, but a completely different chassis that was very, very sloped. I haven't seen any images of it, but it was didn't look like a StuG. It had a lot more sloped armor. Problem was that the new chassis that Krupp designed for the Panzer IV to turn it into an assault gun in February 1943 was just too heavy. Too much armor, it was too heavy, the engine wasn't powerful enough, and as a result the one and only prototype failed its trials, and the project was put on the shelf, never to be heard of again. Now, in the summer of 1943, of course, we had the Battle of Kursk, which didn't go very well for the Germans. They did introduce some new tanks, but unfortunately they were on the back foot from the Battle of Kursk on. Hitler was going over battle reports, he was looking over armor reports, and he noticed something very strange. He noticed that the StuG III, which was based on an inferior, obsolete Panzer III, was outperforming not only the Panzer III it was based on, but it was outperforming the Panzer IV. So he was quite interested in this because the StuG III was cheaper to develop than either the Panzer III or the Panzer IV. They could be developed in larger numbers more quickly than the Panzer III or the Panzer IV, and they had a much, much better record. They had better kill-to-death ratios than any other tanks. They were performing extremely well. Now, this was down to the way the Germans had split their armored forces, because the tanks and the artillery, they worked together in divisions. You had heavy tanks, light tanks, reconnaissance tanks, and artillery support working together. The StuGs, or the assault guns, the tank destroyers, they actually weren't attached to the armor divisions, they were attached to the infantry divisions. So each division of infantry had their own group of tank destroyers working with them. If infantry spotted enemy tanks, very quickly they could contact their commander, who could contact the StuG platoon. The StuGs could get into position and ambush enemy tanks, and as a result they got a lot of kills. They were performing very, very well. The crews considered themselves more infantrymen than they did tankers, and they slept and ate with the infantry as opposed to being a separate division. So the relationship between the tank destroyer crews and the infantry in the German army was very, very close, and as a result they performed and they worked very, very well together. Now, Hitler, seeing that the StuG was outperforming the Panzer III and the Panzer IV in following the Battle of Kursk, basically decided to end Panzer IV production. He decided, okay, well, let's just focus on the new newest tank, the Panther, and let's focus on taking the Panzer IV, discontinuing its production and turning them into tank destroyers, because the tank destroyers have a much better record. They're doing far better against enemy tanks than our tanks are. So that was fine. Now, he didn't mean the StuG IV. He didn't mean turn the Panzer IV into the StuG IV. What he meant was the Panzer IV was already being developed as a tank destroyer by a separate company. That was the Jagdpanzer IV, and it was being built by, I can't remember, I'm going to probably have to look this up. Vomag! There we go. Yes, it was Vomag. There was another German company manufacturing tank destroyers based on the Panzer IV. A company called Vomag was making the Jagdpanzer IV, which was a tank destroyer based on the Panzer IV, but used the same L70 long 75mm gun that was used on the Panther. So this was the tank destroyer that Hitler was talking about. He would pause or stop Panzer IV production and focus on the Jagdpanzer IV with the Panther's gun. However, a couple of things happened that changed his mind and caused the StuG IV to be taken off the shelf and come into existence. The first of all, the StuG III was being very successfully produced. Alket was designing, or were building, about 250 StuG IIIs per month. In fact, throughout the war, from the start to the end, there were over 10,000 StuG IIIs built. But Alket were designing building about 250 of them. But unfortunately, towards the end of around October 1943, because of Allied bombings, the Alket facilities were hit, and it meant the tank production fell from 250 tanks a month down to just 25 tanks a month by December. So all of a sudden StuG III production was halted due to Allied bombing. In addition, the Jagdpanzer IV, even though passing its trials, before it could go into production there were delays because it was designed to come with, as I say, the L70 from the Panther, but there was a shortage of this gun, again down to Allied bombings. There weren't enough guns, and what guns that were being built were being diverted over to Panther production. They were being put on Panthers. So the Jagdpanzer IV was being delayed getting into production due to the fact there weren't enough guns. So on the 7th of December 1943, the German High Command, including Hitler, sat down to figure out what they could do. StuG III production was severely hampered. The Jagdpanzer IV production wasn't ready to go ahead. They wanted to know what they could do. They needed a stopgap tank, and basically the designs for the StuG IV were taken down off the shelf, even though they'd only been put on the shelf about 8 months earlier. But they were dusted off, and Krupp basically suggested that they could possibly revise their design, take the chassis from the StuG III, which was lighter than the one they'd been using on the prototype, put it on a Panzer IV and get it up and running. This was approved by Hitler himself, and just 10 days later, so the meeting was in December, on December 7th, on December 17th, just 10 days later, Krupp had a prototype ready to show Hitler. They had the Panzer IV, they took a StuG III chassis, they put it on the Panzer IV, and because it was a lighter chassis, it meant that the original tank, which was 29 tons, dropped down to just 23 tons with the new chassis, or the StuG III chassis. So it was a lighter tank, and that solved the problem with the original prototype and it being too heavy. The tank was trialled in front of Hitler, it was prototyped, and Hitler approved it. So it went into production incredibly quickly. Not only was the prototype designed in just 10 days and put into trials in 10 days, Hitler approved it, and almost immediately it went into production. So from December 1943 to May 1945, there were over 1,100 StuGs built, or StuG IVs built, and it was essentially just a Panzer IV with a StuG III chassis. Now, usually I compare like to like, but as you can see from this, we only have one other Tier 5 premium tank destroyer in the game, the favourite Su-85I. I'm being ironic here. I still stand by that this is not a very good tank, but yeah, Su-85I and StuG IV side by side, so I don't think that would be very interesting. So the next thing I did was I took advantage, because this is the first review I'm doing in 9.16, I took advantage to pop into the direct compare in the garage, and I drew up a whole pile, or in fact every Tier 5 TD in the game, of which there are 10, and then decided that this is going to be confusing, and I don't think this is laid out particularly well. It's not very clear on screen. Yeah, so I could do the side-by-side comparison. I thought this would make things easier, but when you've got so many tanks to compare it against, it really, graphically and visually, I think it gets a little bit confusing. So I thought I was going to be using this on future reviews, but I'm not. I'm going to do something completely new, which is using the list by stat feature in Tanks GG, something I have not done before. But basically, this is where I've been able to drag up all the tier 5 TDs in the game, list them on one page, and list them by stat. So basically, if you could see, the first stat here is view range, and the tank with the best view range is the Wolverine with 370 meters of view range. So the further up the table the tank appears, the better it is in comparison to the other tier 5 TDs in game. So the Wolverine best view range of 370 meters, Archer next best at 360, the Panzer SFL next best at 340. Where's the StuG IV? Well, it's not here. We're scrolling down, and we finally appears. So it's got the second worst view range of any of the tanks up here. It gets 310 meters of view range. It's only better than the SU-85, which only gets 280. Terrible view range on the SU-85. But, it doesn't tell the whole story, because it's got joint second worst view range with the StuG III-G and the AT2 at 310. But you could see that technically it's the second worst view range. 6 tanks have it beaten. Moving on, so StuG IV doesn't appear near the top. Next stat we're looking at is camo rating. This one's a little bit broken because some of the tanks basically have 0 camo rating, so obviously they're, according to Tanks GG, which is incorrect. The camo ratings haven't been input yet. But StuG IV doesn't look too bad. It comes second. Even if half the tanks up here are missing their camo ratings, it does come second. But the SU-85 is an extremely good camo rating. I would be very surprised if the SU-85 wasn't first, even if all the other tanks had their camo ratings input. But what you can see here is the StuG IV's camo rating is not that much worse. It really isn't that much worse than the SU-85. So again, it wouldn't surprise me to see the StuG second or third up here when it came to camo rating, because camo rating would be very similar to the StuG III-G. Camo rating is definitely a strength on this tank, so not too surprised to see it at the top, even if some of the tanks are missing their camo ratings. When it comes to DPM, where is the StuG IV? Well, it's not on the first page. DPM, we've got 2,156 for the Wolverine. Wolverine is winning again, but we're scrolling down, and it's got the second worst DPM. So of all the tanks up here, the StuG IV has the second worst DPM. When it comes to Alpha, again, we're looking for the StuG IV. Alpha damage, not here. We're scrolling down, and once again, it's the second worst alpha of any of the tanks up here. The AT2 with its 6-pounder has got the worst alpha, 75 damage. StuG IV with 110 damage is the second worst. So, StuG IV, other than camo, it's been appearing at the bottom a lot. The penetration. Now, penetration is obviously based on the gun, and what you can see here is it's got all the guns. It doesn't have all the tanks, it has all the guns. So the S-35CA is going to be appearing a few times. The Archer is going to be appearing a few times, depending on what gun is on the tanks. So yeah, but as far as DPM goes, we're looking for the StuG IV. So this is up against all the tanks, whether or not they've got the final gun, whether or not they're using stock guns or mid guns, but we're still looking for the StuG IV, and it's not here. We're scrolling down, and then we finally find it, and it's basically better than the tanks, most of the tanks using their stock guns, but it's worse than most of the tanks using their mid guns or most of the tanks using their final guns. So again, it's at the bottom. It's only slightly better alpha wise than tanks using their stock guns. So yeah, it's not good. It really isn't good for the StuG IV. Or penetration wise, when it comes to reload, where is the StuG IV? Because the reload in the StuG IV is actually quite good. And once again, it's being compared by gun, not by tank. So AT2 is up here twice already. T67's up here twice already as regards its reload. And the StuG IV is actually doing quite well. So the reload is a strength on the StuG IV. It actually comes 6th, 7th, 8th. It comes 8th. It actually beats the StuG IV-G with the final gun. So the reload of 3.7 seconds is actually very, very good on the StuG IV. So yeah, I would say that's finally a positive. We've got good reload. Aiming time, where's the StuG IV? Look at this, guys. This is one of the biggest strengths, because when we come to aim time, even though all these tanks are using stock guns, mid guns, final guns, the StuG IV still has the best aim time of all the Tier 5 TDs at 1.6 seconds. So it comes first on aim time. It's finally reaching its potential here. When it comes to gun dispersion, once again, we're looking for the StuG IV, and it appears on the first page. Of all the tanks up here on gun dispersion accuracy, it comes fourth of all the Tier 5 TDs in the game. So quite surprised to see the SU-85 up here. Wasn't expecting that, considering it's a Russian gun, but it beats the StuG IV with 0.34 accuracy, but 0.35 is still pretty good, and it's beaten by the StuG III-G, but yeah, the accuracy and aim time seem to be very, very good on the StuG IV. When it comes to gun elevation, nothing special here. Pretty much most tanks have it beaten 90, 30, 25. We're looking for the StuG IV. We're scrolling down, scrolling down, scrolling down, scrolling down, and we finally, because again we've got lots of tanks because different guns have different elevation levels, but we finally find the StuG IV with 20 degrees of elevation, and that's pretty similar to a lot of tanks. It's better than a lot of tanks. It's worse than a lot of tanks. It's probably a little bit below average, but it's about mid. There's nothing special. It's average to below average gun elevation. Nothing special there. Gun depression, again, we're looking for the StuG IV, and the Wolverine beats everything else with 3 different guns on the Wolverine, and it's got the best gun depression of 10 degrees. As we move down, there's the StuG III-G with it says it's got 10 degrees with the L48, so I didn't realize that, didn't notice that, but that's fine. StuG III-G with the L43, it gets 8 degrees. Keep going, we're looking for the StuG IV, and we're scrolling down, 7 degrees with the L70, the final gun, the gun that came down the Panther, so for the StuG III-G, but we finally found the StuG IV, and it's basically at the bottom again. It's only got 6 degrees of gun depression, so it beats some of the tanks, or it's equal to some of the tanks. It only actually beats the SFL and the 85i, but gun depression, not amazing, and when you're in a TD with only 6 degrees of gun depression, it might be okay if you're in a tank with a turret, but when you're in a TD, it means you got to expose a lot of your tank if you're shooting on hills or trying to use rises in the ground. So gun depression, not amazing. It's definitely below average for the tier and for the type of tank it is. A shell caliber we can skip. Shell velocity, this is a big disappointment on the tank. I forget to mention it during the next replay you're about to see, but I do mention it in the replay after that, the final replay, but shell velocity is not good. In fact, the shell velocity is bloody awful on the StuG IV. But once again, the speed of the shell, not appearing anywhere near the top. We're moving down, we're moving down, we're moving down. Still not seeing the StuG IV, still not seeing the StuG IV, even when it's up against stock guns. And finally, even with stock guns, the StuG IV is still got the worst shell velocity. When you consider that this is the StuG III and it's using the derp gun, the derp gun has got worse shell velocity, fine. The stock gun on the StuG III has slightly worse shell velocity, okay, but that's it. It's got the worst shell velocity of pretty much every other tank up here, with every other gun they can possibly mount, with the exception of 2 of the guns, and one of them is a derp gun on the StuG III-G. So it's got terrible, terrible shell velocity. I would say technically it's the worst shell velocity of any of the tanks up here. When it comes to speed, once again, we're looking for the StuG IV, and it's not appearing on the first page. We come down, and it's appearing quite near the bottom, which is surprising. It gets a top speed of 38 kilometers an hour, but when you compare it to the S-35CA, which is not known as a speedy tank destroyer, what you can see is the top speed is almost identical, 38 versus 37, but the power to weight ratio on the 35CA is better than it is on the StuG IV. So the StuG IV doesn't have an amazing top speed. It's okay, it will get you around the map, but it's not good. And the power to weight ratio is worse than a tank like the S-35CA that no one no one would ever call this a maneuverable TD. So yeah, power to weight ratio definitely not good on the tank either. It comes right down at the bottom. Only the AT2 and Archer are technically worse, and it's about the same speed as the 35 CA. So yeah, speed not a strength for this tank either. The power to weight ratio, we've already just mentioned it. Once again, we're scrolling down. Where does the StuG IV appear? Once again, it appears at the very bottom. It's got the worst power to weight ratio of any of the tier 5 TDs in the game, with a power to weight ratio of 1170. So it's not fast, it's at the bottom, and it's got the worst power to weight ratio, and that pretty much tells you what to expect as regards its speed, acceleration, and maneuverability. It's not good. Moving on, health. How are we doing with hit points? It's not appearing on the first, well, it is appearing on the first page, but it's nothing special. Some of the tanks up here have more health, 450 for the AT2, 380, 360. We get to the StuG IV, and we're down to 360, which is similar to the Americans on the T67, similar to the Wolverine. Some of the other TDs have worse hit points, so it gets more hit points, 10 more hit points than the SFL, the StuG III, or the SU85. And the S35CA comes bottom with 330. So yeah, even the hit points, not amazing. It's not the worst, but it's not the best. So hit points are pretty average. When it comes to weight, not that important, but once again, we're looking for the StuG IV, and we can see it's pretty average. It comes right in the middle. StuG IV, it's basically a little bit heavier than the StuG 3G, but again, I don't know whether this is a good stat, because the heaviest tank is obviously going to win. Surely the lightest tank should be best, and that's the T67, so it probably is, but the StuG comes right in the middle. So weight-wise, it's average, but it gets the worst engine. So moving on, how are we doing? That was weight. Next one up is, I'm losing track of my thought here. Hull armor. Okay, we've got a positive for the StuG III or StuG IV, because the hull armor is actually quite good. It comes third on the list. The AT2 obviously comes first with 203mm of frontal armor, but the StuGs aren't too bad. We've got 80mm of frontal armor on the StuGs. We're going to go into that in more detail when we pop into the 3D model. And we've got 30mm on the side, but this is technically better because, as you can see here, the StuG IV has side skirts. The StuG 3G doesn't have side skirts, so even though they both got 30mm on the side, the StuG IV actually has better armor because the side skirts are spaced armor. Technically, the StuG IV has better side armor, but what you can see is it's got worse rear armor. So StuG 3G actually comes ahead of the StuG IV because it gets 50mm of rear armor compared to 20 on the StuG IV. It had some armor at the rear shaved off in order to save weight. So basically, yeah, a frontal and side armor very, very similar, but its armor is pretty good. 80mm on front is definitely amongst the best of the TDs, with the exception of the AT2. So another positive for the StuG IV, I suppose. Turret armor is useless and armor is useless. So there we go. That is a new way of looking at the stats. It's up to you guys. Let me know whether or not you prefer this way, or whether you prefer the old way of doing it, or whether you'd like to see me use the in-game comparison tool. This is just something different. It either works or it doesn't. Let me know in the comments. So the StuG IV does actually get 80mm of frontal armor. You can see that the lower glacis here is about 38, but it's quite small, quite hard to hit. The upper glacis here, or the mid strip here, is 82mm. Okay, so we get our 80mm, but one thing that is surprising is, even though this tank has sloped armor and flat armor, that flat armor is actually all the best armor on the tank. So even though it's flat, you can see these flat areas here, 80mm thick. So these are not weak spots, even though they're flat, unless you have a decent gun. Where you want to shoot a StuG IV if you're facing one frontally is the upper glacis, or the upper plate here, because it's only 20mm of armor, 22mm of effective armor. Even when it's angled, still very, very easy to pen. Even when he's above you and you're shooting up at it, still very, very easy to pen. Basically, this is no armor. You're going to be able to pen this with any tank that can possibly face a StuG IV. So this is where you want to shoot it. The rest of the tank hull is about 50mm, maybe a little bit less, maybe a little bit more. So you can pen other areas of the front of the tank. Gun mantle can be a little bit tricky because of the way it's designed. Here it looks like a solid block, but it's not a solid block. But you can see that the armor, you know, it moves from 100mm down to 80, 50 in places, but it's kind of weird, and that's because of the way it's designed. So you can see that there's a few different layers. due to the way the gun mantlet is shaped, and you've got this square ridge at the back which makes it all look solid, but it's not. You're basically shooting at different areas, so gun mantlet can be trolled or might be pinned depending on the tank that's shooting you. The side armor, nothing special, only 35mm, 30 in the garage, but because of this spaced armor, these side skirts, you can see that the side skirts count as 5mm of spaced armor, so basically 35 on the sides. They don't cover the tracks completely, but there's a very, very small gap between the tracks and the spaced armor. They actually do more to protect the side of the tank than the track, so you can shoot below here, but I mean, it makes no difference. 35mm with the spaced armor, trying to shoot here 30mm, and trying to shoot through the tracks 30mm. So side of the tank is actually quite good, but most guns are going to be able to pen it as long as they're not firing heat. The only time this side armor is really going to be effective is against tanks that are firing premium ammo heat, because it's going to be absorbed by the tracks, it's going to be absorbed by the spaced armor before it hits the tank. The rear of the tank is pretty poor, 20mm on the back and 30mm on the upper area at the back. So side armor, not great. Rear armor, not great. Frontal armor can be a little bit troll as long as people aren't shooting your upper plate. Gun mantlet and flat areas are all pretty good otherwise. So I think the armor is pretty good on the tank. It can actually bounce shots. It can be effective, but you can't count on it. But it is technically one of the best armored Tier 5 tank destroyers in the game. So let's check out this gun and this engine in action. We are here on Fjords as I'm avoiding tanks leaving the spawn. A Tier 5, Tier 6 game, so I'm bottom tier. I'm bottom tier in a Tier 6 game. Oh, the joys of special matchmaking, because this tank gets special matchmaking, as I'm going to keep on mentioning throughout this review. And while it's a very, very mediocre tank as regards to the stats, it's terrible in some aspects, it's actually quite good in other aspects, but overall it's pretty average. The fact it gets special matchmaking is special. You can see we're struggling, absolutely struggling, going uphill. It's on the flat, it doesn't accelerate particularly well. It is actually quite good at shooting on the move, although we missed that shot in the chaffee. And we're just advancing, so we're going uphill. We're going to use these rocks here, see if we can get some shots at maybe tanks coming down the B line, tanks coming up through the middle, the 5-6 lines. I'm going to be trying to use my camo rating, and I'm going to be using my 10 degrees of gun depression. But you see, we're struggling to get over 20 kilometers an hour because we were on a rise. And this lack of horsepower, this lack of engine power is really going to hurt you on some maps. So this is a 9.16 or 9.15.2 replay, so outlines are still going to cause a little bit of a problem sometimes. Looking for shots. Okay, KV1, and we can put a shot, and the gun is accurate enough to be able to hit his weak spot, and then we bounce because he's angled, and that's what you're going to find. You would have found that on any tank using this gun. 110mm of penetration, or is it 110? It's 110 damage, 110 penetration. You're going to be bouncing on angled targets, so we do get spotted. I reverse, just looking for shots. We've done our first damage, 122 into the KV1, was able to snipe his weak spot, and now an SU-85 has appeared, SU-85B, not much to shoot at. Waiting, is the T1 Heavy going to advance? Oh, SU-85B is advancing, and we get a shot in. Again, no replay, or no outline, I'm sorry. He's gone stealth, but look at the accuracy, look at the rate of fire. That's 3 shots, 4 shots. So we're able to get 4 shots out in about 8 seconds, and we're able to kill the SU-85B blind. I had a feeling I'd tracked him, so there's our first kill with 4 blind shots into an SU-85B. The rate of fire is good, even though the DPM is not great in the tank, but that's simply down to its lackluster alpha. It's accurate. We hit all of those shots into the 85B. In fact, other than that shot on the move, I think we've hit every single shot, other than that shot on the move on the chaffee at the beginning. So I'm moving up, I'm going to be using my camo rating, get a shot into the side of a T1 Heavy. I do get spotted because the bushes weren't fully solid, but we get our second kill. So, again, a little bit of damage, now we've just taken a hit. So we're getting shot, and we get tracked. But can we see the hit mark? Can't see where I was penned, unfortunately. We can see where we took a bounce. Yeah, okay, don't know, but we retract, we let our crew repair it. No point in wasting a repair kit. and we're just advancing looking for more targets. Now the KV-1 has retreated. Oh, that's the little booger who's shooting me. Cromwell B, we can swing around. Even though our gun depression's not amazing, we wait for him to advance and we can get a shot. Look at that, not much to shoot at, but we're accurate enough to hit his turret, and accurate enough not only once, but twice to snipe the top of his tank. Now I've just been shot at again, I don't know who's shooting me. I'm angled, and unfortunately T-34 is able to pen me. So again, trying to angle a little bit, he misses. Now we'll set up. Look at the aim time, is pretty good. Missed my shot, but look at the rate of fire. Lose a little bit more health. Took a shot prematurely there. That was the second shot I missed. But okay, so we've missed 2 shots of this entire game so far. I'm down to 34 health because the armor really isn't that good. I wish I could see. I must have that option turned off. I don't know why I can't see decals. But yeah, the armor, not amazing, but if they shoot your gun mantlet, it can be quite good. The accuracy shooting on the move can be quite good, although we've only missed 1 shot. Sniping with the gun, it's pretty good. You can abuse your camo rating, sit back, play like a traditional TD. It's a little bit more difficult to play this tank aggressively because of the speed and maneuverability, but it will get you around the map. As you can see, we're advancing. We will get around the map. I'm hoping to get the 5th kill here. And there we go. Shot in the move, swing around the corner, kill the SU-100Y. 5 kills. The gun behaved. We were able to damage some tier 6s. We were able to damage some heavies as long as they weren't angled. As soon as they did angle, then we had problems. But you're never ever going to have to face tier 7s. And that's the main point here. Play it like a traditional TD. Use your camo rating. Snipe. The gun is rapid firing enough, even though the DPM is not amazing. The alpha damage is good enough, even though it's not amazing, because you don't face tier 7s. Penetration is good enough, because you don't face tier 7s. So not an amazing game, but we still managed to pick up 5 kills, even though we were bottom tier. You know, and again, that's the point. Bottom tier in a tier 6 game as a tier 5. Special matchmaking is what makes this tank a lot stronger than people would have you believe. It's not a great tank, but the special matchmaking really does boost it. So it was a first class and we picked up 5 kills. Showed off the gun, showed off the engine. Not very many people are playing it, so that was enough. 690 was enough to get a first class, but we did 900 damage, 5 kills. I can't complain. The gun is accurate enough, it's rapid firing enough, you can have an impact even in tier 6 games. Really good game from our Dickermax there. Actually, I should have been looking to see where that guy was set up. He had a really, really good game. 2k damage, very, very surprising. But another German premium TD doing well in that game. But the gun, yeah, 15 shots fired. You got to see the rate of fire. You got to see the accuracy. Hit 15, or fired 15 and hit 11. So I missed 4 shots in there. Maybe 2 of the shots on the SU-85 missed. I'm not quite sure. But we ended up hitting 11 and penning 10. So we bounced on the KV-1 as soon as he angled. Happy with the damage, as I say. Spotted 2, damaged 6, destroyed 5. Now the view range on this tank is not amazing, but we spotted 2. Might have spotted them without the binocs, but I think the binocs are a big advantage to this tank. Now it doesn't get really, it's cheap. The ammo resupply was cheap, the auto repair was quite cheap, it is a tier 5, so you will make money in this tank, but didn't do that much damage, but showed off the gun and engine. Made 18,000 credits with a premium account, so it's not an amazing moneymaker, but then again, that wasn't an amazing game. So let's talk about crew, and the StuG IV gets 4 crew members. You get a commander, a gunner, a driver, and a loader. So does that make it a good crew trainer? Well, when we take a look at the Germans, unfortunately, they have a lot of TDs we need to go through, but yeah, as a crew trainer, it seems to be okay. You can train up, the lower tiers. You've got an extra loader, but you can train up the low tiers, the Jagdpanzer 1, the Marder 2. Again, you're going to be missing a loader. You get to the Marder 38T and things start to go a little bit wrong because we need a radio operator. So still no, we get a loader, but no radio operator. So we've got a spare gunner. The Hetzer is a perfect match, however. We get a commander, gunner, driver, and loader, so the Hetzer works, but the Marder 38T doesn't. We get to the StuGs, and obviously these have exactly the same crew layout, just like the Hetzer. Commander, gunner, driver, loader, tier 4, tier 5 is fine. Commander, gunner, driver, loader, but we go to the other TD line with the Panzer SFL, and then unfortunately we need a second gunner and we need a second loader. So no radio operator here, so we can train up 4 of these crew members, but we're going to miss a gunner, we're going to miss a loader, and it's just the way the German TDs are. It's so many variations, so many different crew layouts. We get to the Nashorn, and now we don't need a second gunner, but we do need a radio operator. The StuG IV, we need a radio operator, but the rest of the crew are here. So that's fine. We get to the Borsig, and now the radio operator is no longer available, but we can train up a full Borsig crew, so that's another bonus. Then we get to the higher tier, the Waffenträger Panzer IV, and unfortunately, we're back to the same old problem. We need our radio operator back, and we need a second loader. When we get to the Gorilla, I don't think we need a radio operator. I don't own a Gorilla yet. Oh, we do need a radio operator. So we need a radio operator, we need a second loader. So on one line of German TDs, it matches some, but in most cases, you're going to need an extra loader and you're going to need an extra gunner. And for the Panzer SFL, you need an extra gunner. But for most of the other tanks, you're going to need an extra radio operator and an extra loader. When we go on from the StuG to the Jagdpanzer IV, which was originally the tank destroyer supposed to be designed from the Jagdpanzer, or from the Panzer IV. We've got the commander, gunner, driver, loader. Perfect layout, obviously. Jagdpanther 2, things start to get complicated again. We're going to need an extra radio operator, so not as bad as the other line. Jagdpanther 2, need an extra radio operator. Ferdinand, there's so many. We're going to need an extra loader, extra radio operator. Jagdtiger, again, we're going to have the problem in that we need an extra loader, extra radio operator. The Jagdpanzer E100, extra loader, extra radio operator. So, it's going to be very, very difficult to find a premium tank that matches the crew layouts for German TDs, because there are so many variations, so many different crew layouts. The Dicker Max actually is probably one of the better ones, because you do get your radio operator, but you're still going to be missing a loader. So the Dicker Max is probably a little bit better as a crew trainer than the StuG IV is, but it's still, and then the Jagdtiger 88 is obviously much, much better because it matches the Jagdtiger crew. But Jagdtiger 88 is probably the best crew trainer, followed by the Dicker Max, but the StuG IV isn't terrible. It's not a terrible crew trainer. You're going to need an extra radio operator, you're going to need an extra loader, but it's fine for the low tiers up to the mid tiers, and then for one of the tanks you're going to need an extra gunner from somewhere. But other than that, I think it's okay. It's not amazing, but that's not the StuG IV's fault. It will match the low tiers, mid tiers, mostly, and it will match the Borsig. So if you have a Borsig, you can train your Borsig crew in here. So it's not terrible, but definitely could be better. But historically, nothing that can be done about that. But let's move on to equipment. Now, there are quite a few equipment choices, but not really that many viable, because basically it's a tank destroyer. And when you get tank destroyers, usually it's going to be a very, very limited set of equipment. A toolbox, completely useless on this tank unless you've got no other equipment and happen to have a toolbox lying around in the garage, or maybe you're using the StuG IV to train up a brand new crew, but I think the StuG IV comes with a 100% crew to begin with. I'm not quite sure. I can't remember. But toolbox only viable if you've got no other option. It won't hurt the tank, but I think there are much, much better pieces of equipment. Enhanced gun laying drive. Again, improving your aim speed. Absolutely pointless on this tank because it's got amazing aim time anyway. It's got the best aim time of any Tier 5 premium tank destroyer. Coated optics. Not worth it, I don't think. Coated optics might be okay on some TDs if you're playing them aggressively, if you're on the move, for example in the Scorpion G. Scorpion G is another premium tank destroyer I forgot to mention, but the problem with coated optics on the StuG IV is it only gets 310 meters of view range, so those coated optics are only going to get you 31 extra meters view range, and the binocs are going to do much, much better than that. Binocs are going to have a much bigger effect. So for example, will it show me? No, it doesn't show me, but binocs are going to get you much, much better bang for your buck. Also, the camo rating is one of the strengths of the StuG IV, so I think binocs and a camo rating combined mean it's a much more viable than coated optics, but definitely you're going to need to use one or the other because the view range is not good on this tank. Additional grousers is kind of surprising because grousers are usually only available on lower tier tanks. This is the first time I think I've ever seen them on a called grousers on a Tier 5. Maybe I'm talking through my head. I can't remember, but basically to improve your terrain resistance. The problem with grousers is, as you can see, they weigh a ton. So never ever put grousers on any tank. They weigh a ton, and if you increase the weight of your tank, therefore you decrease the speed and maneuverability. So, you know, while these are designed to give you 10% performance on soft ground, 5% on medium or moderately soft ground, they have no effect on hard ground. They're gonna, you know, they might have a small performance increase, but the fact they weigh a ton means you're gonna have a small performance decrease. So I think, you know, never put grousers on a tank. As I say, usually it's on lower tier tanks they're available. I didn't even know they were available for this one. And the lower tier tanks they're available for only weigh 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 tons. So if you've got a 5-ton tank and you're putting a grousers that weigh a ton on the tank, then it has a big effect. Wouldn't have as much of an effect on this, but they are very heavy. It's a complete waste of time. Never put grousers on any tank. Medium caliber gun rammer, absolute must. You know, improve your DPM by 10%. Yes, please. The DPM on this tank is not good, so try to improve it with the gun rammer. Medium small liner, complete and utter waste of time. You already have spaced armor, and that spaced armor will help you from explosions anyway, unless they land a shot directly on you, but it will surprisingly help you a little bit with shots from the side. Yeah, medium small liner, it's not the worst idea, but I think there are much better pieces of equipment. Enhanced levers, that's basically improved suspension. Again, pointless on this tank. It will improve your traverse speed slightly, but no, it's not worth it. Better piece of equipment. Wet ammo rack, complete waste of time, waste of money on something that's only a tier 5, especially when there are better pieces of equipment. You don't get ammo rack to that much on the tank, I don't think. Improved vents is a possibility. Again, if you've got an experienced crew, you might choose to put vents on there, get 2% extra out of the tank, but I didn't go for vents, and the main reason I didn't go for vents is because there's a camo net I haven't mentioned yet. And the camo net, with this tank's camo rating, plus camo net, plus binocs, plus a crew that are trained in camo, or training in camo in the case of my commander, I think the camo net is a much better piece of equipment. So vents are a possibility, but really that's the only possibility. I don't really think any other piece, even the coated optics, I don't really think is a possibility. Yeah, vents over camo net or vents over the binocs, about the only piece of equipment that's, you know, kind of iffy, but I'm happy with my setup. So I've gone for the rammer, gone for the binocs, gone for the camo net. So there you go. That is equipment. Okay folks, time for the overview game, a game where I try and show you as many strengths and weaknesses of whatever tank I'm reviewing in one replay. We are here on Karelia. First of all, you're going to see we're going downhill. The acceleration, not amazing, but at least we started near our slope, so we end up going downhill. We get up to 40 kilometers an hour, we hit the straight, and we're back down to about 37, 38 kilometers an hour. Now, this is fine. This is okay for a TD. We're getting into position quite early. We're going quite fast, and then we start going uphill. And watch the speed drop off. This is where the lack of engine power comes in. You've only got a 300 horsepower engine, and it means our speed has dropped down to 10, 11, 12 kilometers an hour, and going uphill is painfully slow in this tank. As I say, a tug should be able to get up that hill a little bit quicker. It's just a rise, but we swing around, and next you're going to see the shell velocity. So in the first game when we were discussing the gun, I was talking about how accurate it was, the aim time was good, the penetration was good because it got into special matchmaking, but look at this. The tank keeps stop moving! Oh, we finally stopped moving, we're finally able to get a shot in, but look at the shell velocity. It's got terrible shell velocity. Because I was shooting most of the targets at close range in the first replay, I didn't get to talk about that, but when you're sniping at long range, the shell velocity is not good. It takes forever for the shell to reach the target, and as a result the target may have moved. Now I know there's an A43 behind me, but what I'm doing is I'm moving up to get my circle, my render range within view of the hill, so I can help the Panzer 38 NA, but doesn't look as if the enemy tanks are advancing. I'm turning around, and look at just how bloody slow it is to turn around and maneuver, and then I changed my mind. I figure the A43 is less important. We've got a KV-85 moving up, and there we go. Shooting at range, you can't see the outline, but that was the side of a KV-85, and we bounce. And now the Hetzer, so we're still going to pen, even though it does get special matchmaking, you're still going to struggle against tanks with armor. We get a shot into the Hetzer and it bounces. So a couple of bounces and I take a big hit from something. Huge hit from something. And I've just lost half my health, or a third of my health. over a third of my health. So yeah, it gets 360 hit points. That's a negative. And the rear armor is absolutely garbage. And if you know what you're doing, the frontal armor is terrible. But put rocks between myself and whatever shot me. We're going to work on this Matilda, and you can see we're actually shooting on the move. We're reversing and we're shooting on the move. I don't think this guy can see me. I really don't think this guy can see me. He's not looking at me. He must have a terrible, terrible crew. And yeah, he couldn't see me. That's my sixth sense going off. A43 advances, and look how slow it is to swing around. And we get a shot in. Now, something you're not noticing me doing here, but I'll point it out when it happens, is you've only got a 10-degree gun arc on this tank. That is incredibly narrow. The gun arc is incredibly narrow on this tank, so it means that you've constantly, if you're tracking moving targets, you're constantly having to move the hull of your tank, and then you have to go through the aim sequence all around again. Oh, tree falling, did you see that? So there's a tree falling, so I start firing blind, and to spoil the surprise, two of these shots, I fire a lot of shots, but two of them actually hit the target. So tree fell, just shooting it where the tree fell. Do I go for some more? Yeah, I'm going to go for some more. So you can see the reload, the rate of fire is quite good. We're pumping out the shots here. Shot, reloaded, ready to take another shot. So yeah, the rate of fire is something I actually do enjoy on this tank, but you can see that the gun arc is very, very narrow. So the view range is terrible. If you're looking at the mini-map, my view range square or circle, very, very poor. We're only covering the middle of the map, can't even see the hill, but it's good enough to spot the T67. And you can see us adjusting, I'm adjusting constant, there we go, having to adjust the hull of the tank in order to make sure that my gun can track a target. You will find yourself, I'm doing it just naturally because I've gotten used to playing the tank by now, but there we go, having to move the hull of the tank in order to swing my gun around, and we managed to get a shot in on the Hellcat. Ah, okay. So, yeah, okay, I must have hit him just once with a blind shot. So M8, see, I'm trying to track the M8A1 and I reach the end of my gun arc, have to adjust my hull, and then my reticule gets large again, I have to go through the whole aim time again. That's something, there we go, just had to do it again. It's annoying, so annoying. Do we get a shot? No, he dies, but yeah, slow shell velocity when you're shooting and sniping at distance. When you're shooting and sniping at distance, you'll find yourself bouncing a lot more. The narrow gun arc annoys me much more than the 6 degrees of gun depression. But we're advancing, and now we get to move again. We're going downhill, we get up to about 30 kilometers an hour, we go uphill, and we start bleeding off speed. Downhill, we're doing okay. Get up to 40 kilometers an hour, and uphill, once again, we lose all our speed, so down to 15. So yeah, the maneuverability of the tank, it's good enough to get you around the map, but it's definitely not a strength of the tank. So we're set up here, just waiting for the RLV-39 to spot something. So far we've only done 700 damage, we've gotten 2 kills. Now the camo rating is quite good. You saw me shooting that Matilda and not being spotted till the A43 moved up. That T67 did not spot me either. And we're just advancing. You're going to see more camo rating coming up here. So we're advancing, and up till we killed the T67 it was still a 50-50 game. Enemy team of a TOG, a Cromwell, and a dangerous Hetzer left, and the Hetzer and the Cromwell, or the Hetzer and the TOG haven't been spotted up till now, so I figured they were camping spawn. Someone manages to get a spot in the Hetzer. I think that might have been me. I'm not quite sure because no one else is in a position to spot him. So we advance. I didn't get spotted, my sixth sense didn't go off. So tree falling in front of me, bush falling. I'm debating whether or not to go for a blind shot. RT is blind firing, so I move forward to the second bush. Then we spot the Hetzer. We spot, maybe it was the Achilles, but we get one shot into the Hetzer. He gets into cover. And now we can focus on the TOG. But look, still have not been spotted. My sixth sense has not gone off. So with a camo crew, camo net, and a little bit of bushes, or bush mechanics, you can stay unspotted. So again, bushes are solid. Move forward till they're clear. Move back so that they are solid again. Although I don't think they were fully solid, but yeah, was able to get a shot at the TOG, he wasn't spotting me. So the camo rating can be exploited on this tank. RT has now been spotted, but I'm not too worried because if I haven't been spotted, RT can't be aiming for me, but I decide to move forward just as the TOG moves forward. And there we go. Now, trying to use this rise or this dip in the ground to stay hidden. We've got shots into the side of the TOG. There's me adjusting the hull of the tank to try and keep my gun on target because he'd reached the end. It just sounds amazing, but the TOG reached the end of my gun arc. And we missed a shot as a result, but we're fast enough to track down at least a TOG. We're moving in, shot in the move, and we bounce. Second shot in the move, we pan, and yeah, this tank, it's decent at shooting on the move. So another shot in at close range. So yeah, I mean, the StuG IV, the maneuverability is an annoyance, but it's not terrible. There are tanks that are far, far worse in this game. The gun arc is the thing that does annoy me because you're constantly having to move your hull, constantly having to break your camo rating, constantly having to break your binocs. Whenever you're tracking moving targets, the gun arc is really, really annoying. It annoyed me on the SU-85I, it annoys me on the StuG IV, and it's the same gun arc. It's only 10 degrees. So when you have to keep on adjusting the hull of your tank, and your tank doesn't have, well, it's got good armor for its tier and for a tank destroyer, but most tanks are going to be able to shoot you, most tanks are going to be able to hurt you regardless. Your camo rating is really important, and in the StuG IV you keep on breaking it because of that narrow gun arc. The gun depression, not amazing, you got to expose a lot of your tank, but when you do abuse the gun, you do abuse the camo rating, it can be quite good. The only other annoyance is the shell velocity, which I forgot to mention in the first replay. The shell takes forever to reach the target, and as a result, you're going to find yourself bouncing at distance, you're going to find yourself missing shots at distance, and that's assuming you can hit the target if they're on the move because of that narrow gun arc. So it's not a tank without problems. So slightly better result in that game. We picked up another ace and a Confederate. We finished not top, but we finished second on XP with 948. That was enough to pick up the ace. And 1600 damage. I mean, tier 5, once again, tier 6 game, bottom tier, because of the special matchmaking. But, you know, 1600 damage, nothing to sniff at. Good game from our Achilles. Did almost 1900 damage as well, 6 kills. So yeah, good game from him on the other side of the map. But yeah, I mean, the StuG IV, it can perform even when it's bottom tier in a tier 6 game. It's good enough. You abuse its camo rating. The gun is okay. If it faced tier 7s, the gun would be absolutely awful, but it doesn't face tier 7s, so the gun is okay. The only real annoyances, to be honest, are the maneuverability, the slow shell velocity, and the gun arc. They're the 3 things that annoy me. But yeah, happy with the result. 35 shots fired. I fired a lot of blind shots, but we hit 20. So when I wasn't firing blind, we pretty much hit what we were aiming at. 16 pens, so we bounced 4 shots in that particular game. So again, those blind shots must have bounced a couple of times because I bounced 1 on the TOG, I bounced 1 on the Hetzer, and yeah, I can't remember where the third bounce was, but yeah, I must have bounced a couple of blind shots. But yeah, damage was alright. Spotted 5. Now, considering this tank has no view range, this is why I think the binocs are so important. We actually managed to spot 5 enemy tanks. So I did spot the Hetzer, I did spot the TOG, I spotted the T-67 in the middle. We damaged 8, destroyed 2, did 567 assistance damage thanks to our spotting with binocs, and we earned 33,000 credits. So yeah, StuG IV, you know, it's a very, very mediocre, perhaps even below average tank, but as I keep on saying, it gets special matchmaking, and that makes the tank a little bit better than the stats would suggest. Okay, folks, time to sum up. Is the StuG IV worth going through all those personal missions to try and get your hands on it? Well, I'm going to say yes, primarily not because of the StuG IV, but because not only do you get the StuG IV, but it opens up further missions to get other tanks along the way. Mission 2, Mission 3, and Mission 4 have different tanks, and I think some of those tanks are pretty good. So you're going to have to get the StuG IV regardless of whether or not you're interested in missions if you want the later tanks. Also, by doing the StuG IV missions, what you're actually doing is, if you complete the final mission and you get your you complete them with the secondary objectives and everything else, you get female crew members. So not only is there a possibility of getting the StuG IV, but you've got female crew members, and the female crew members are extremely good. They already come with their own version of Brothers in Arms, and not only that, but it means that their second skill is the same as the first skill. So you have to earn the same amount of XP for their second skill as you would for the first skill on any other crew member. So, you know, female crews can level up incredibly quickly to their third or fourth skill as a result, because their fourth skill is the equivalent of their third skill on another normal crew. So not only do you get the tank, but you get female crew members along the way, and I think, you know, Crews are so important to this game, and it's something a lot of players overlook when they race to get to tier 10. You know, they're playing tier 10s with really, really bad crews, and that's something you should never do. No point in handicapping yourself. You put a good crew in your higher tier tanks because you want to get every advantage you can. So you get female crew members, and you get access to tanks further along with other missions. So that's one reason, even if you're not interested in doing the missions to get a StuG IV, that is one reason to do the missions, simply to get the crew and simply to move on to maybe trying to get better tanks. So let's go into the pros and cons. Well, first of all, the tank has a decent rate of fire, even though the DPM, well, that's a con, but DPM is not amazing, but the rate of fire is good. The accuracy is good. The aim time is absolutely amazing. The aim time is great. Best aim time of any of the tier 5 TDs, as I keep repeating. So the gun is fine, and something I haven't mentioned is that it carries a lot more ammunition than the StuG IIIG does. The biggest problem with the StuG IIIG is you can run out of ammunition. This tank carries 60 rounds, so that is pretty good. A lot of ammunition. And the StuG IIIG only carries, is it 30 something? Maybe 40? I'm not quite sure. Secondly, as I say, it's a reboard tank, so it comes with a 100% crew. I think, I can't remember, I switched out my 100% crew for something else, but I think it came with a 100% crew that isn't the female crew, so you actually get 2 crews by doing the StuG IV missions and getting the StuG IV. But the biggest benefit, or the biggest positive that the StuG IV has, is special matchmaking. So this tank will never ever see tier 7. So as much as you want to complain about the gun or it being a step down from the StuG IIIG, well, the StuG IIIG sees tier 7s, and this tank doesn't. You know, it might not have as great penetration as the 3G, but you know, it doesn't need to face tier 7s. It might not have as much alpha as the 3G, but it doesn't have to face tier 7. So the special matchmaking, there aren't too many tanks available anymore with special matchmaking. So getting your hands on a tank with special matchmaking is a little bit more special these days, and that is a big bonus for the StuG IV. So yeah, oh, and the side skirts. Yeah, the side skirts cover the side of the tank as opposed to just the track, so they can, you know, help with people firing heat. Premium ammunition. They will absorb heat, and they'll prevent a little bit more damage from arty. If it's a splash, then it's not going to do as much damage to your tank as it might be if you didn't have the side skirts. On the other hand, the view range is not very good. The view range, definitely a big negative. You're going to have to boost that, and you're going to have to rely on other tanks to maybe spot for you, or you're going to have to abuse bush mechanics, or maybe use your own camo rating to try and counteract your poor view range if you need to spot for yourself. The mobility is desperate. You know, the mobility really is desperate. It's very poor at turning. It's very poor at accelerating. It's very poor at maneuvering around the map. The StuG IIIG, you know, is much better when it comes to that. Don't expect similar performance because this tank is a lot worse. The engine is a lot worse. The speed, you know, the top speed isn't terrible, but it's going to struggle to get to that top speed due to that engine. And you're really gonna suffer in this tank when you're going uphill. You can argue that it has better ground resistance than the 3G, but the time you're really going to notice that lack of engine power is when you're trying to go up slopes, trying to go uphill. The tank slows right down. You know, we're talking about TOG levels here, or even worse than TOG sometimes. So yeah, the speed and maneuverability definitely not as good as the StuG III, and you know, not good to begin with compared to other tier 5 TDs. The firepower, I've already mentioned that. It's got, yeah, alpha damage is rather low for a tier 4 or tier 5 TD. And, you know, let's face it, the gun, it's a medium tank gun. It's a tier 5 medium tank gun, but it's on a tier 5 TD. TDs are known for either their DPM, which this tank doesn't have, or its alpha, which this tank doesn't have. So it basically, you get medium tank gun performance from a TD without the benefit of a turret. You've got to deal with the gun depression, you've got to deal with the narrow gun arc, you've got to deal with the fact you've no turret, and you've got to turn the hull in order to track enemy targets. So, I mean, it's not as much fun to play as maybe a tier 5 medium. It's not as flexible as a tier 5 medium, but it does have camo rating to go for it. The gun depression is not amazing at 6 degrees, so another negative. Because it's a tank destroyer, you're going to have to expose yourself with, you know, when you're using the tank on hills and rises to get shots with just 6 degrees of gun depression. The StuG 3G has better gun depression at 7 degrees, so it doesn't need to expose as much of the tank when you're trying to use it on a hill or a rise. So the gun depression means you got to expose more of your tank, which means you got more chance of getting shot back, so that's another negative. Yeah, pretty much overall, it's not as good as a StuG 3G, other than the fact it gets better aim time and more ammunition. It's basically worse than the StuG 3G in almost every single way. So it's not an amazing tank, but then again, it's not terrible. It really isn't terrible. It's pretty average. I mean, when you consider that a premium tank, Wargaming's definition of a premium tank is a tank that's better than a stock tank of its own tier, but not as good as a fully upgraded tank of its own tier, that's exactly where the StuG IV fits. It's not as good as a fully upgraded StuG 3G, but it's better than a stock StuG 3G. So it's a pretty much average premium tank, even though it's a reward tank. I'm going to call it a premium tank. But the special matchmaking means that, you know, even though it's an average tank, it actually has the opportunity to, perform even better, because it never has to see tier 7. So even though very, very average, not as good as the StuG 3G, it will see, or will only see tier 6s at most. So you've got an opportunity to actually do more in this tank than you do in a StuG 3G sometimes. Yeah, there are better tanks that use this gun. This is a TD with a medium tank gun at tier 5. It's not amazing, but it's not terrible, and it's pretty average. Do the missions to get the crews and get access to new missions to get other tanks. Don't do them to get the StuG 4, but if you do get the StuG 4 along the way, it's not terrible. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.